minutes, a chance for you to ask questions about leadership, management, workplace issues. I'll put the theory and the principles of leadership into some action steps for you to take to hopefully overcome any of those obstacles and things kind of tripping you up as you go through your week. Before I got too deeply into it, I did want to give a shout out. Tomorrow, noon Pacific Standard Time, I will be tackling Angela Duckworth's great book, Grit. Really been enjoying this book, so I hope you'll tune in tomorrow, noon, and we'll discuss that book. Patty, great to see you join here. So while we queue up some people with some questions, I do have some that I received offline. And hey, if you're coming to this late, not a big deal. You can always drop your questions into the comments section. I will get them on the next episode. Or for those that want to keep it anonymous, you can always email me, cm@cameronmorrissey.com, or direct message me, and I'll make sure to keep the names and places out of it. Mark, glad to see you joined as well. First question that comes up is the best way to get your skills and knowledge seen by departments that normally don't see you. And so I take this to be an individual who has some knowledge, who has some skill sets, and would like to make sure that those skills are getting acknowledged in other departments or seen so that she could perhaps move between areas or between departments. The best way to get your knowledge and your skill set seen by others is to volunteer for assistance. All right, then now this can be something that is very simple, and that's usually how I prefer to start, because you don't want to start volunteering yourself for work in other departments without your boss being intricately involved in that. But simple things you can help with. So whether it is meeting with somebody in the break room and kind of discussing work and seeing where your skills and your knowledge might fit, that's a great way of doing it. Or simply asking a colleague who you happen to have a decent relationship with in another department, how, is there anything that I could help with, or what are your struggles? So ask the other departments where they're struggling, where they need help, where they could think they could be doing better, and see if any of those things match up with your skill set. Now, if it doesn't happen initially, that's fine. Readdress it a month later. They'll be dealing with different things, and you'll see if you have an opportunity where you have something that kind of fits. That's a great way to start. If you want to get known and seen by other departments, offer to be of assistance. Again, generally with something small, not a big deal at all. You can do that in your free time, and it doesn't take away from your regular work. That's a great way of doing it. Robin, good to see you join as well. Next question I have, and I love this one. It's a great, just basic one. We all know the importance of team building. But just because we know it's important doesn't mean we necessarily know how to do it. So this question is, what is the best way to bring your team together as one? The biggest thing in team building is having shared experiences. Having a shared goal is excellent as well, but I'm going to focus more on the shared experiences. So what can you do to bring the team together as one? You ask how to do that? Well, bring them all physically together in a meeting room and discuss an issue. Have team meetings on a regular basis, once a week, once every 2 weeks, once every 4 weeks, and talk through issues. What you're doing is you're physically bringing the team together. And for those with remote teams, that's fine. You can always do video conference calls like we're doing here basically, or phone conference calls. Video is always better where you can see the individual. So do that, bring them together, but then start doing things together. Okay, what is the biggest issue in the department right now? Start getting ideas, start engaging people. When you have quiet people, ask them, Cameron, what do you think about that? If I've been quiet in the corner or something like that, bring them into the discussion. You want to create shared environment and shared experience. Now, I do recommend, to go another level deeper than this, I do recommend simple team building exercises. And you can Google team building exercises. A lot of them only take 5 minutes, 10 minutes max. You can find one in there that works for you. In fact, you can probably find dozens that work for you. And do those on a regular basis. Again, whether it is every week, every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks. What you're going to find is it might be silly. It might fall flat on its face. I know an individual that tunes into these live Q&As did this, and it fell flat on its face. But go back to it 2, 3 times. Commit to doing it 3, 4, 5 times. And what you're going to find is where one exercise might not have resonated with everybody, the second exercise resonates with another part of the population, and the third exercise resonates with the third one, but also realizing that it's not going away, makes people more involved. What you do with those exercises and what you're looking for is when they can find out more about one another. And one of the classic ones and one of the ones that I've really enjoyed is 2 truths and a lie, where you find out more about an individual. They've got to list down 2 things that are true and 1 thing that's a lie, and you have to pick which one is the lie. You'd be surprised how many people have work together for years and start finding out more about one another. And when they do that, they come closer together. So that's the big thing. If you want a team to get closer together, bring them together as far as proximity is concerned and have them have shared experiences, working through issues, coming up with, I mean, it can be simple, there's team building exercises, working on issues, or it can be something fun. Like, hey, let's plan the Halloween party since that's coming around the corner here. So look for those opportunities as well. Next question comes in from Phil. Evening. Be good to hear your views on line managers who constantly snaps and shoots down her team in meetings. Also, criticism of managers work in front of the manager's team. How to deal with that? So, a couple of things. So when you have a boss who just shoots down ideas left and right, 2 things that I want you to focus on in this. One is phrasing your ideas in a way that addresses what your boss cares about. There are a lot of times where your manager has legitimately a different perspective on things than you do, and they are focused on different things than you are. Again, there could be very legitimate reasons for this, but get clear on what the manager in this case is focused on. Are they focused on speed of execution? Are they focused on sales? Are they focused on profits, cost, customer service? What is it that they care about? And when you have ideas, you need to phrase your idea in a way that addresses their concern. Now, sometimes there's a little bit of logical aerobics that goes on when you do something like this, but a lot of times it just means clarifying a particular issue so that you find out how it addresses customer service, how it addresses cost, how it addresses profit. Then they will be more apt to hear more, to listen in a little bit more to that. The next point, I'm like, all of a sudden I've lost my point on that, is the second point that I was going to make on that. The other thing to do on this, and I'm just going to kind of keep going and see if it could, you know what, it's not coming to my mind right now. So if you have a boss that is constantly snapping, shooting down things, then that's the second portion of it. So you want to address it in a way that addresses their concerns. The second thing is you want to make it easy. Really easy. So a lot of times you will bring a good idea to your boss, and it's a good idea. They can recognize that it's a good idea, but they do not have time to address it. They've already got a few irons in the fire. They can't stop working on those things. And so time and ease becomes an issue. Phrase your ideas in a way that makes sure that it takes minimal effort on your boss's part. I will prepare the presentation for it. I will accompany you to the board meeting if necessary. If you want me to talk to your boss about it to get approvals, I'll go talk to the CFO and get approvals on it. So make it easy for them to say yes. All right. So address things that they care about and make it easy for them to say yes. None of that's easy. I recognize that that isn't easy. But if you start practicing those 2 elements of things, you're going to find that your boss listens a little bit more. Now, Phil, that may not have been addressing what you were looking to address there. And so I will, if you have further clarifications on it, drop it down in the comments. We can keep that conversation going, because I know that is one that commonly comes up, is a boss who won't listen to your ideas. Zach had a question over on YouTube here, live streaming over on YouTube. Jurassic World or Jurassic Park? I almost always go with the originals on these things. Enjoyed the heck out of Jurassic World, don't get me wrong, but nothing's going to beat that first experience with Jurassic Park. Storyline was probably a little bit better in that too. Good question, Zach. Next one comes in, and that is, we had a system implemented that went very, very wrong. We now are in a situation where we have manual procedures more than ever. How do we get back to the efficiency that we had before? So in this case, and this is a cautionary tale for everybody who is out there. In this case, the system was switched out and there was no means of going back. And so what you've done then is you've committed yourself. And I know it's a Coronado, I think, who burned the ships when he came to the New World to give his people motivation, which, by the way, isn't actually real. But this is a cautionary tale that you want to have that backup. You want to be able to go backwards. It's one of the big things. I've done a lot of system implementations, gone with a lot of go lives, project management stuff, and just spending a little bit of time to understand how you could unravel something if it goes all wrong, gives you a huge amount of confidence moving forward. It really helps with the buy-in of the team and everybody, and it gives you that peace of mind as well. Now, if it's a case where you can't roll things back, you've got to tackle this in two ways. All right, you have to look for the small, simple things. A, you're working with what you've got right now, the new crummy system. The other thing that you're doing at the same time is you're starting from scratch. Okay? And with both of these things, what you want to do is you're looking for something simple and something small that you can put into place to start improving. Either one of those. Fix a small, simple mistake in regards to the system that was implemented. Start from scratch. And what is the next improvement to a manual process that you can make? Can you start batching things together? Can you start specializing certain people in certain areas? But look to tackle both of those things, because the manual process isn't going to be a long-term solution. And that's why I'm saying, usually I would say focus on one thing, but that manual process isn't going to be long-term. So find ways that you can improve that manual process and continue to look for simple and small ways that can start fixing some of the problems, taking advantage of some opportunities. I doubt that the entire system failed. There were probably big areas that did, but there's certain small areas that were a success. See if you can leverage those successes in other areas. That's one that's often missed. We focus on all the problems and we forget that we can also leverage successes as well. So that's my big tip in regards to that when you have that system failure. Next question comes in from Nauman, and that's, keeping in mind manufacturing background, your subordinates are obstinate. You need their sheer participation to fix machines, and at the same time, you do not have authority to fire them. What to do then? Few different things that come to mind on this one, Nauman, and you've probably tried a few of these, and what you have to realize is with so many of these things, and everybody out there, with so many of these things, behavioral issues in this particular case, it takes perseverance. You aren't going to get it right the first time. It's going to take a second, third, fourth, 10th time to get through to people and to get their behavior to change around. So a couple of things, Nauman. First of all is, what's in it for me? Why should they care about fixing machines? What is in it for them? And the main thing that is in it for them is show how it is easier for them when they fix the machines. All right? Maybe you even come up with a way that makes it easier. Maybe you pull them off of the manufacturing line to fix machines. It's a day break for them, for instance, something along those lines. But really address the what's in it for me. That's the basics of motivation. We're all very self-directed. I know I am. And so I want to do things where I am getting some sort of benefit. Clarify what that benefit is to them. All right. The other thing is, look for those people that would be willing to step in. There are some people who don't want to fix anything, who are frustrated when they try to fix things. And then there's other people who like the challenge of that. See if you can identify some individuals that can take on that role. There's no problem in having a manufacturing environment, a call center environment, whatever your department is doing, and having people that specialize in certain areas. That doesn't mean that's all they do. It may just mean that 10, 20, 30% of their time, they're focused on that because that's what they enjoy doing and that's what they're really good at. And see if you can get people to jump on board that way. The other thing is to bring them into the discussion, Nauman. Why is it that they aren't interested in fixing the machines? What's the problem with fixing those things? What is the problem with them doing whatever it is that you ask them to do? And don't be accusatory, and it really just open it up. Hey, I know that I get resistance from you guys when I ask you guys to fix the machines. What is it about that that's frustrating? What could I be doing that would make it easier for you to do that? And just open up a discussion with them. A lot of times all they need is to be heard. That'll actually give you a little motivation boost right off the bat. But the other thing is there may be legitimate issues that need to be addressed. Or there's something that's silly that they think is serious that you could, no problem, you could take care of that. And maybe you can address that and get them to turn around. I hope that helps out, Nauman. And good to see you here. Next question comes in. My son just graduated and he has a full-time IT job. What advice would you give him for the workplace as a young man? Well, as a young man or a young woman, the first thing that you need to focus on is you need to focus on doing your job exceptionally well. So focus on mastering your craft in the current position that you have. All right. Once you have done that, then the next thing is to start offering to assist other individuals. I can spot the leader in an organization by simply walking in and looking at who everybody goes to when they have questions. And oftentimes that isn't the person that's sitting in the office in the corner with the title of leader. Oftentimes it is another individual that's sitting next to them. So master your craft and then offer up to help other individuals. That's really the essence of leadership, and that's what's going to get you another level of satisfaction in your work. Maybe you don't want to be a leader, so you master your craft, but then you make more of yourself by being a servant to other individuals. That might be sharing your knowledge, tips, tricks. That might be answering questions. That might just be giving your 2 cents on how to deal with a situation. But that's my big advice for those that are just starting out in their careers. Master what you're doing, then offer assistance to other individuals. I guess I'll add a third one to that. If you do want to continue moving up the ladder in your organization, the third principle behind that would be asking your boss if there's anything that they would like help with. And you phrase this in a way of, I'd love to move up in the organization. Let them know that you'd like to move up in the organization, and then ask to help them out with things that might help you move up in the organization. Round out your skill sets. Might be project management. It might be training. All of those things. Those would be my big hints for you there. Next question comes in, and as we've had people jump on here, if you have any questions, drop down into the comment section. Happy to help you out with those, and I'll be able to tackle them almost in real time here. So next one is, when creating a new team, how often should there be team meetings scheduled for everyone? Love that you're talking about team meetings when you're creating a new team. In particular, it's important. And I guess that would be part of it. So my wishy-washy answer on this is it depends. It depends on your industry. It depends on how much communication needs to take place. The thing is with team meetings is you want to allow enough time for you to take action on the items that come out of those team meetings, or enough time for other issues to present themselves. So you wouldn't want to have necessarily a team meeting every single day because you couldn't get accomplished what you talked about in the last meeting, and not enough has changed to warrant a meeting in this particular case. Ed, good to see you join here. So in the case of a new team, I would probably tackle this just generally, and again, this depends on your environment. I might start out with once a week for the first 4 weeks, and then it goes to every other week for the next 2 months. And then it goes to every third week, or whatever that happens to be, wherever is suitable. In a lot of cases, every other week or once a month is the kind of sweet spot from a team meeting perspective. But it does depend on what is being addressed and whether there's enough time to address it and for other issues to crop up to make that team meeting time valuable to everybody. So there's no reason that you can't adjust the team meeting schedule, all right? Realize that you have that flexibility. I don't care if you come into a department and they've done team meetings every month. If you think that it's every 2 weeks that makes sense, then make the adjustment. If you find that you aren't getting enough value out of it, then go back to a month. It doesn't mean that some of these things need to be set in stone. Next question comes in is, as a leader, I always tried to do the jobs no one liked. Is this wrong? It did create a problem when I left the company. Yeah, it can definitely do that, Mark. No. I'm coming back to that just a little bit. No, I mean, I like that as an opportunity. That's you being a team player. So I like stepping into those jobs that you don't like. I guess the question I had and what was causing me to pause just a little bit is making sure that you're balancing that with motivation. If everybody doesn't like those jobs, it's probably for a reason. And so you don't want to burn yourself out on jobs that you don't like just to be a team player. That's a recipe for long-term failure, not necessarily long-term success. So I would look for opportunities to do things that you like and find a little bit of balance with that as well. And you hit on the other point there, and that is that if you end up doing all of these particular duties, that doesn't lend itself to a long-term benefit for the organization, because then nobody else is doing it, and that becomes, as you stated, a problem once you leave that department or leave that organization. So I'd still look to find balance. I think stepping up and doing things that people don't like to do is a great team player attitude to have, but find that balance, because you also don't want to be the person that just always picks up the slack when there's something crummy going on. Great question, Mark. Like that one. Next question comes in. Best way to get buy-in from current team on compliance issues and not cutting corners in preparation for a new person being brought into the team. So there's lots of kind of tests that you have within organizations and for your leadership. And one of those is when you bring a new person on board. When you bring a new person on board, they are judging. And you want to have the tone set ahead of time so that they can be successful and they don't slack off from expectations. I've seen this happen in organizations I've been involved in, where you have a person that is an absolute superstar and they're picking up the phone on every single, on one ring all the time. And what you end up finding is they're answering 80% of the phone calls. And then slowly but surely, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks down the road, all of a sudden, they're letting it ring 3 times before they ever consider picking it up, just like everybody else. So you want to have those expectations in place. Part of it, I would say, is if you have a smaller group, is actually call it out and say, hey, we're bringing on this new person, Cameron. He's coming into the organization, and we really want to set the tone as far as those expectations are concerned. So whether it's safety, whether it's compliance, we want to have those things buttoned up. And then you hit them with the WIFM, the what's in it for me. The reason we want to do that is so that they are a great partner and we aren't picking up any slack from them. And they also have that motivation to hit those levels right away. So we're not spending as much time training them, which means that you have more assistants out on the desk. So that would be a big way is just being upfront and saying, hey, we need to get better at this. And then that becomes a challenge for you going forward in maintaining that level of expectation. So whether it is reports that you need to start writing up, whatever it happens to be, find a way to lock in that benefit and to start holding everybody accountable for those expectations so there doesn't have to be any sort of special push when you bring the next person into the organization. Asif has the next question for us. You mentioned we should let our boss know that we want to move up. How about if we are working in a company where promotions are fixed or preferred to the locals? Example, in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE. It doesn't hurt to tell them that you are interested, but Asif, if you are in a situation where you can't move up in the organization, because I'll use the example here in the States all the time, it would be nepotism. So you don't get promoted because there's always a son or a friend or a daughter that gets promoted ahead of you. So it doesn't hurt to express your interest just in case it isn't as fixed as you think it is, and that there's all kinds of misunderstandings that take place there. So yes, I would let them know that you were interested in moving up. However, if you see a barrier like this that you're presented with there, talk about the benefit of addressing that barrier. All right, so it may be that bringing somebody like you in would potentially help management relate better to the workers and get their messages across to the workers. So present a benefit if you see an obvious barrier to you moving up in the organization. Now, the other thing with this, Asif, is that you want to be looking for opportunities outside of your current organization where they might have supervisor roles for those with immigrant status. And I'm making a guess here that that's what we're talking about here in the Middle East. So look for opportunities where you could move to a supervisor or a manager role where they have people that are in those levels from outside of the native population. The reasons to leave a job are that you're not learning anything and or that you don't have any upward mobility. And so let's see if you don't have any upward mobility, that might be a chance to look elsewhere. Otherwise, yeah, absolutely. It doesn't hurt to let your boss know that you're interested in moving up in the organization. It's one of those things that could probably only help. Ahmed has the next one for us, and it's what's the best way to put a skill development plan for team members whom differ than each other in skills to be developed? Yeah. In addition, the best way to follow up with this development plan between all field work we had. The other question is the time frame to follow up with and how many points to follow up in this time frame. Great questions. Appreciate that, Ahmed. So individual development plans, which is what we're talking about here, Ahmed, do need to be specialized for the individual. All right, and the reason for that is even if everybody is doing the exact same job, they all have different strengths and different weaknesses. And so if you want to improve their performance, you're going to have to address different areas. Even something in, say, a manufacturing position where somebody is on an assembly line, they're going to have different things that they're good at and different things that they're not. So realize that they are going to have to be individual development plans. Now, I recommend that you do those IDPs every month. All right, a month is a good amount of time to tackle whatever it is that you discussed prior and to see what the results are of that. Now, you mentioned how many things. Well, part of it depends on how important those things are and how big of a change those things are. There might be a chance for you to address 3 things if they're simple things. But here's my caution on this, Ahmed. If you want to tackle more than one thing in every single one of those months that goes by, what you're doing is you're opening yourself up to the possibility that the person addresses one of those and doesn't have the motivation to address the other one. And what happens is they use the excuse, yeah, I know I didn't improve in this area, but I did really good here. All right, you don't want to be in that situation. Now, there's a couple of ways to deal with that, and we'll get into that just a little bit too. So be mindful of doing anything more than one. The other thing about that is when you do just one thing every month, or it could be every 2 weeks if that works for you as well. But if you do one thing every month, then the fact that you have a laundry list of things that you want them to work on encourages you to continue with this process for 3, 4, 6, 12 months down the road, where they can address one thing every single month. Now, the other thing to this is you might have a formal meeting every month where you're discussing what you discussed beforehand. But it is important that you are checking in with them on regular intervals and you are seeing what's working, what isn't working, and the two of you are coming up with a way to adjust the plan that you had for the new information you have. So they might try out what you guys both thought would be a great idea, and they try it out the next day and they find out that it's not going to work. You don't want a whole month to go by before you address that. Come up with something in the meantime. So you formalize it on a monthly basis, and then you are informal with it in the interim. And then you make adjustments as you go. The last thing that I want to mention for those people that are putting together individual development plans for their team or even for themselves is that it will be hit or miss. You will try some things and they won't work. I like to say that if you can manage a 2 steps forward, 1 step back, where 2 things work and 1 thing doesn't, then that's great. But that also means that 2 months you're taking a step forward, but then one of those months you're taking a step back. Realize that that's the reality of growth. All right, growth doesn't come without some failure. If you aren't experiencing failure in your growth trajectory, then you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough and you're not growing as much as you could. So all points to make in regards to that, Ahmed. Thanks for the question, and I like the way that you phrased that, and I like that you're doing that with your team. Jan has the next question for us, and it's how to handle very difficult colleagues in terms of work ethic, work manipulation, and people management. When you talk about a colleague, as opposed to talking about a subordinate or a boss, there's a limited amount of authority that you can put to that particular issue. There's also, I call it a little bit of a dance that you have to do in this case. And so when you have a difficult quality, you could call out the expectations that everybody's held to. What I really prefer to do is I prefer for you to pick your battles and to pick something simple. So you're tackling a couple of different I want to say theories on dealing with behavioral change on this one. So pick a battle where something is obvious, all right, where they're not meeting, where their people management sucked, or they're manipulating the work or something like that. Something that is obvious, simple, and that you have proof for. And start there, Jan. Start with that and look to open up that discussion. All right, you start with something simple, and that way it isn't it isn't as big of a change, and they don't think that you're usurping their authority or trying to position yourself over them, or all of that political baloney that goes on when you try to help somebody out and help them help you. So start with something small, and that opens up the discussion, and then you move on to something larger and something more less obvious that you have less backup for, and look to address those things. Also, look for where you can provide them tools to help them. All right. Hey, just so you know, I created this checklist for my team. You might roll it out to your team. It could probably help you with this, because it certainly helped my team get much better results. So look for those opportunities where you can just feed them stuff that works for you, and that's the case. But start really small, start obvious, start with, and pick your battles that way, as well as other sensitive issues, and see if you can open up the discussion and then get them to move on from there. Hope that helps out, JN. Forever Lean over on Twitter has the next question for us, and it's, how can you work on your leadership skills when you're generally an agreeable, gentle person? That's fantastic. Most of the people I think that tune into these live Q&As are people pleasers. They believe in the best of people, and I would say agreeable. And gentle might be a way of phrasing it as well. I don't see an issue with that. The issue comes in when your agreeableness and your gentleness fosters the willingness, in your case, to bend expectations for people. All right. If you want to improve your leadership skills, it's all about getting the most out of your team. And so one of the main places that I see people pleasers fail is that they aren't holding people to expectations. Now, the way to do this is to try to get as black and white with it as possible. Numbers are my favorite. So whatever those expectations are for productivity, for attendance, for quality, whatever those things are, see if you can assign numbers and report those numbers on a regular basis. One of the best ways to hold people accountable is for it not to be a surprise when they don't meet that accountability. All right, so when they see that they are below the level of production that is the line, or that everybody else is, they're not surprised when you come up to them and say, hey, I wanted to talk to you about your productivity and see if we can find ways to address it. And that's the other thing, is when you do have those problems and you do have those conflicts, let's say, don't think of them as conflicts. Think of them as coaching sessions. Hey, I wanted to bring you in and have a discussion with you about this. They might have some ideas, you might have some ideas, but the thing is that you are working together on it. And that's one of the big things that can help you get over too much agreeableness. So get crystal clear on those expectations, report those out on a regular basis. That makes that conversation easier. And then when you do need to have those conversations, make it more of a coaching session, make it more of a dialogue. What ideas do you have? Here's the facts, here's what we have, how can we make this better? And so that takes a lot of that pressure off of it. I guess the third thing that I'll mention on this is when you do give them positive feedback, when you're giving them the pat on the back, don't just give them a pat on the back and say, good job. Give it to them in the same way that you would negative feedback. So what happens is when they screw up, we say, hey, you did this, it had this impact, and I need you to change. So when you're giving positive feedback, you say, hey, you did this, this is why that's so important, and how can we do it even better next time? Or how can we do this every time? Or can I have you train everybody else in how to do this if they're really superstars with it? So I hope those are suggestions. You can put one or two of those in place and hopefully get over any of that concern that you have. But you're in a good spot. If you're a people pleaser, agreeable, gentle, not an issue. There's plenty of hard-hitting CEOs that are exactly like that. But they're firm in the areas that matter as far as expectations, and they get the most out of those particular areas. Asif has the next question for us again. It's how to motivate the locals to meet their targets. While their career growth is already more or less confirmed to them, because of this growth confirmation, the motivation level of these employees is at their minimum level. So when you have a team that doesn't have any upward mobility, doesn't really have any monetary motivation, let's say, to exceed their performance, how is it that you motivate them? First of all, Asif, you look to make the work environment better and easier for them. They'll be more motivated if they aren't feeling like they are just being crushed with the weight of responsibility. So look for opportunities to make the work environment more enjoyable. Maybe not fun, but at least make the work environment more enjoyable. The other thing is to solicit their opinions. What is it that could make the work better? When they realize that you are listening to their concerns and you are addressing those particular concerns, then that is something that is going to make them more satisfied in their jobs. One of the main dissatisfiers of people, and one of the main reasons they quit, is that management didn't care about their opinions and wasn't interested in their ideas. If you open up that discussion, you get a natural lift. You'll also find ways and ideas to improve that performance from the people that are doing it. So those are a couple of ways to do it. I would also, and I realize that this may not be possible, but I would look for some sort of incentive structure as far as pay is concerned for the work that's being done. And that depending on the industry, that's possible, not possible. But I always look for some sort of graduated structure where people who are exceeding, expectations are getting 10% less, but those that are way under expectations are getting 10% more, and the other ones are getting 10% less. I like that because you have different workers and it gives that motivation within the job. And in the case of not being able to have more pay, you can split 25%, 25%, 50% so that you are still paying that same amount. But engage them. That's going to be your big ticket as far as improving morale and improving production is that engagement. That's the number one thing that I would do. Next question comes in. JN has it for us, and it's, how do you work with direct reports who challenge your authority? I like people that challenge my authority, JN, because it gives me a chance. It is one of these, we talked about earlier, this is one of your tests of leadership. Can you give a reason why you told them to do something? I assume that it was necessary and it needed to be done for a very valid purpose. What is that purpose? When people challenge my authority, I am up to that test. And I can explain why I asked them to do something the way I asked them to do it, why I did something the way that I did it. And it allows me to explain myself to them, and that's what builds trust. So they give an opportunity for me to build trust. Now, is it frustrating? Yes, it's frustrating, Jay, and I'm not going to deny that it is. But if you lead correctly, lead thoughtfully, then this isn't something that's a concern, and it's something that actually strengthens the foundation moving forward. This happens a lot when people get promoted from the rank and file into supervisor roles. So now they're managing their former friends or current friends, or young people that get brought in and are supervising old people. Those with more experience, let's phrase it that way. This happens a lot. And what you want to do in those cases is explain the reason why. The why and the reason is your foundation for what you do. And it's what builds the respect of your team. I hope that helps out, Jane. If it doesn't, again, throw in a follow-up. I'm happy to get to that too. Nikhil has the next one for us, and it's, can an employee get a good hike in a new company after just 1 year, assuming that he or she has performed exceptionally well? Quick answer is yes. Longer answer is it depends on the company. There's a lot of cases where there is a very firm structure as far as pay. And so it becomes difficult to get a pay raise without moving on to a different job. I've dealt with this before where there were people I wanted to give raises and we simply couldn't give them raises because they were in that firm structure, whether you agree with that structure or not. The best way to get a raise and get a pay hike, Nikhil, is to get promoted. What would be your next step up? And maybe it's that step doesn't exist right now. So what I tell people a lot of times is try to create your promotion. A lot of people, I almost want to say half, but that would be overstating it. But a good percentage, I'll say 20, 25% of people that I work with get promoted into jobs that didn't exist. And so what you do is you do exceptional work at your job. But then you also help with training, and you help with special projects, and you help with presentations. And so what you've done is you've now expanded your role and your circle of influence. And what you do is you go to your boss and you say, hey, I know that I'm a coordinator right now, but I see that I'm doing this and this and this, and I'm curious whether we can create a position of lead that I can move into, and I can continue to do all of the things. Here's the caveat to that. I could continue to do all these other things, but I can also help you out with other areas like this and this and this. Or it can simply be, I'd move from an hourly role to a salary role. And I know that's always dangerous, but if you want to keep moving up and you're kind of stuck there, it's something that could be worth the extra hour or two a day to move from hourly to salary. But offer them something in return for that. Not that you're just continuing to do exactly what you've been doing before, because there's no motivation. You're already doing it. There's no motivation for them to do something else for you. So give them that. Explain that you're doing something much more than what your peers are doing, but then also give them another carrot if we moved into, say, a lead role or a supervisor role, if those don't exist right now. So that'd be how I would tackle that, Nikhil. Ahmed's got the next one for us. Can you tell us more about yourself and what made you such a great leadership consultant, practice-wise, experience that shaped you? If you don't mind. So yeah, I'll use that to kind of maybe close things out. If you have questions, drop down. I'll be happy to get them. So I've got over 20 years of management experience. So a lot of this comes from me suffering through the trenches. And what happened for me a little over a decade ago is I made a stupid mistake in regards to deadlines. Gave somebody who's very capable a task to do, but I didn't tell them when I needed it. I thought it was assumed, and it wasn't. And so that started a post-it note of, give deadlines to people. That started Twitter, that started blog posts, that started books, etc. And so I learned on the job. And yeah, sure, again, talking about grit tomorrow at noon Pacific Standard Time. Sure, I read lots of books, but I was paying attention. And what happens when you pay attention to yourself and your own mistakes, you're also able to look elsewhere and look at other people's mistakes. And that nothing is better than learning from somebody else's mistakes before you've learned from it. So that's really how it happened. Very organic, very simple. So with that said, I'm going to close out for today. If you have any questions, I'll get them on the next episode. Drop them into the comments, cm@CameronMorrissey.com, direct message me. But really good session today. And again, tomorrow, Angela Duckworth's great book, Grit. Some really good stuff in there. Really enjoyed this book, and I hope you see you tomorrow at noon. Thanks so much, everybody. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.